Hey, I'm Robbie Kramer. You're listening to the Leverage Podcast, where we discuss using your social skills to hack dating, travel, finding your dream job, and becoming a complete man. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And today's episode is about a topic kind of rarely discussed in dating, but it's hugely important, and that is self-love. And what the heck is self-love anyways? Well, today we have a very special guest by the name of Jonathon Aslay, who wrote a book with that exact title, What is Self-Love Anyway? And his work has been featured on ABC, eHarmony, CBS Radio, and NBC. And he believes that dating strategies are often too one-dimensional to have a real meaningful impact. And instead, it's the act of dating itself that brings out what he feels is the number one emotional health issue facing singles today. And that is a soul-deep lack of self-worth and self-love. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Well, welcome, Jonathon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, after listening, I'm like, God, I want to hear all about this. Big tongue-in-cheek.
No, when I got that intro, I was like, wow, yeah, this is a topic that we've never discussed on the show. We've discussed it kind of briefly, but yeah, it's great to have an expert like yourself on. So.
Well, I want to clarify something for those watching, because the word expert is kind of, it's funny, it triggers me a little bit, because I'm just a person that has a perspective on this. Mm-hmm. And while I do this repetitively, and why I'm sharing this with your audience is we all have a perspective on life. And so my invitation for everyone is lean into those things that feel good, that feel right, that feel aligned with who you are. And I'm just sharing a perspective to help make that shift if that's possible. So.
Totally. Yeah, I do the same thing whenever someone calls me an expert. I'm like, yeah, I have my perspective, and I like how you said that. So yeah. Tell us about, how you got into this, give us your background and your story. And
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, real quick for your audience, I'm a dating and relationship coach specializing in midlife, which is after baby making years and before retirement. So, although nowadays I'm actually getting a lot of millennials coming to me for help, and which I'm really excited about. But after going through a divorce, turning 40 and going through a divorce, I found myself single and put myself out there. And at the time, internet dating was just starting to become popular. I mean, now it's like passé, but it feels that way. And so I thought you could just punch in exactly what you want and someone would magically appear. And I went out on a date with someone, had a great time, great lady, something wasn't right. A few days later, met another woman, nice lady, great date, something wasn't right. Happened again and again and again. And in 1 year, I had over 100 internet dates.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you were doing a lot right to get the dates in the first place, because a lot of the guys
I had that part down, but the something wasn't right was me. So right. I began doing a deeper dive into, personal development, self-help, and spiritual work, because I recognized that the real fundamental issue I was the common denominator in all this. But right. Robbie, what was fascinating was I was talking to so many women, and there were times when I had like 4 or 5 chat windows open on my Yahoo Messenger, and I'm talking to like all these women at the same time, that many of them just used to reach out to me on a friendship level. I mean, I was talking to women all over the country. And they would just ask me, hey, Jonathon, I know we're not going to date, but will you check out my profile and tell me what you think? So I would recommend that they make some changes in their dating profile, pictures and essay and that sort of thing. And then like 3 weeks later, I get a phone call. Oh, I met a great guy. Will you check out his profile and tell me what you think of him? And I realized after a while, after looking at guys' profiles, I had a knack of kind of figuring out men's personalities, because I spent all this time figuring out women's personalities. And the gals would ask me, well, tell me what you think. I'd give my perspective, and they'd call me up 3 weeks later. Oh my God, you were so right about that guy. And right around that time, I started to date an internet marketer, a coach, and she was very successful. And I thought, and that relationship didn't work out. And afterwards, I'm like, I could do this. I could coach people on dating and relationships. And that was in 2009. 11 years later, here I am. I've written 2 books. I've been on so many summits I can't even count, and podcasts and everything. And my career was born.
Very cool. Yeah, it's funny. I've dated a lot of women, and they've all become dating coaches after. Right? You kind of have obviously, she was an internet marketer, and maybe that's what allowed you to like see, wow, that could be something that I could
Yeah.
easily bridge the gap into.
Well, there was just interesting because she was a coach and a women's empowerment coach, and I watched her business for 6 months. And at the time I was doing insurance, and I was really miserable in what I was doing. And then the market crash happened and all these things. And I found my passion in helping people navigate this process. Now I want to be candid with your audience because I've had a recent revelation.
Mm-hmm.
For about 8 years, my coaching was really based on why I was so unhappy with the process. And in some ways, I blamed women for the problem. Just
Mm-hmm.
like women blame men, there's no good men out there, men are commitment phobic. And I recognized that for the first few years of my coaching, I had a real chip on my shoulder because I didn't feel appreciated in my marriage. I didn't feel appreciated in the dating process. I oftentimes felt used in the dating process. Now, let me be clear. I was doing the same thing too. So
Right.
I wasn't taking responsibility for how I was using people. And what I mean using is, it was that I've got this hole inside of me and I need you to fill it for me to feel good. And so the edge that I had in my coaching kind of came from a negative place. And it wasn't until that in 2017, I lost my mother, and she was 88 years old. She lived a good life. And, when you experience death, it really shifts your perspective on things. And at that time, I started to write about self-love and self-worth. I started to blog about that. And as an experience from when my mom passed, I started to look really inward. And then 6 months later, my 19-year-old son passed away. And that's him right there. That's my mom and dad right there. And it was in that experience that it really broke me open to recognize that what I experienced all those years and what I've witnessed from clients is that deep lack of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough. Fear sets in, or ego sets in, and I'm too good for everybody, and I'm too good for this process, and that's where ego and fear sets in. And that's right. What triggered me. I use the word triggered me, but it was such a powerful, any parent that's watching this probably knows their greatest fear is losing a child. And mine was 19 years old, just beginning his life. And it devastated me, but it also broke my heart open. And 2 months later, after he passed, I began writing my second book. And I published it 9 months later, the book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? Because I believe this is a fundamental, I don't want to use the word problem, but area that needs to so be addressed in the dating realm in particular. Because we've been so conditioned to get love from others and be okay with that, and not being conditioned to love on ourselves first. And that's what I want to lean into, especially in the dating process.
Yeah, it's I love the title of your book, because typically when you tell someone who's in the dating process, like, oh, do you love yourself? Like, how could anyone love you if you don't love yourself? They're like, well,
yeah, exactly.
What does that even mean?
Yeah.
So how can you break it down a little bit more for us? Like, how does one, because it's a very abstract concept. Obviously, we all know the more we love ourselves, the more we allow others to love us. And oftentimes what feels like love to us, I think, is just kind of people filling those holes or those gaps in our own, what's kind of lacking. And that can sometimes be toxic, or it could be great.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
So, and you bring up something, a lot of people think self-love is woo-woo, or it's abstract, and a lot of people are turned off by the terminology. So my invitation for everybody is think of self-love as self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-reliance. And recognizing that we all have a little kid inside of us, as well as the adult in us as well. That little kid is that place that feels either ego or fear. Most of the time, fear. And so self-love is nurturing that, our soul within our, that little kid inside of ourselves. And the idea is to do this in the concept, or in the process of like learning how to rewire the brain partially. But I like the way Marianne Williamson talks about love, and is when we begin to remove all the blocks to love, that is blocking to love, then we feel love for ourselves and we can feel love for others. And let me repeat that. Feeling love for ourselves and others. It's not and, or others, it's and others. And
Gotcha.
and so most of the time it's easier to give love because we can be in control. Giving love to others, for example, that feels easier than receiving love. And that's why self-love is also learning how to receive. It's give it to yourself and learning how to receive it. And so in my book, I lay out about 30 different not so much exercises, but, invitations to start shifting on how to love on oneself the way we would have been loved on as a kid.
Yeah. Can you give a couple of examples of how to go about the process?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share it with, like, chapter 1 in my book is called Speak Your Truth, Do It with Kindness. And let me be clear. Truth oftentimes gets, especially in relationship, is everybody has their own truth. In other words, as if truth is fact, okay?
Right.
Well, our truth is merely our feelings, and feelings aren't facts. They're just feelings, okay? So speak your truth, do it with kindness. The idea is to begin to start speaking up for oneself. Just learn how to do it in a more kinder, gentler way when you're communicating with others. And I'm sure everyone in your audience would say one of the most fundamental pieces of a successful relationship is communication, right? Communication, right?
Yeah.
But what's so fascinating to me is humans are terrible at communicating their feelings to one another in a way that isn't unhealthy.
For sure, you could say that 100 times. It wouldn't be more true. We're so, and everyone's saying like, oh, just, you have to communicate. You have to communicate. And, I'll talk to clients. They'll be like, yeah, I told my girlfriend, the truth. I told her that I didn't like this, I didn't like that. Yeah. I was like, well, so basically you were just a dick. And well, I was being honest. I'm like, well, maybe. So yeah.
Well, it's recognizing that there's two people in this conversation, and while you might have your perspective, it's also what I say, speak your truth, do it with kindness, is recognize that there's another person that is part of this process. And so, and going back to this idea of communication, everyone says, well, you need to listen. Well, I also think it's important to be an effective communicator as well, so someone can actually hear you. Now, let me give you an example that happens with a lot of my clients. I'll get a phone call from a woman, we're working through coaching, she's in a relationship with a guy, and she'll say, I want more commitment. I'm like, great. What does that look like for you? She'll go, well, I just want more commitment from him. I'm like, great. What does that look like for you? But Jonathan, I just want more commitment from him. And I'm like, if you can't describe what that looks like, how is he going to know what that means? And so she's arguing with me about commitment. And I'm like, but the word can mean two different things to two different people. So in communication, it's learning each other's context. What does that mean? Does that mean we spend 3 or 4 days and nights a week together doing shared activities and hobbies and mutual interests, spending time with family and friends? Or is it seeing it once a month? Two people can have two different views on that. So communication is learning to actually speak deeper into what you want to convey other than the surface level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I hear that similar stories all the time. Like, oh, I just want more commitment, or I want more intimacy, or I want more XYZ. And it's like, well, can you define that? Yeah. Well, no, he should know what I mean, or she should know what I mean.
Exactly. That's the other thing, we're expected to read each other's minds. And so and women have been conditioned to not share their feelings with men. And I'm, as a coach for women, I'm like, you lean into and start to express your feelings, start to express what matters. Because if you're sincere and from the heart, this is one of my chapters in the book, if you share something and it's sincere and from the heart, you can never say the wrong thing to the right person, or you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. In other words, if it's sincere and from the heart. Now, you could, if you're coming from ego or fear, you can certainly disrupt a relationship, but not when it's from the heart.
Right. And when you say to the right person or the wrong person, is that, if you say it from the heart and that person, walks away or acts like a jerk, you've weeded someone out who wasn't a good fit, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's that old adage, rejection is God's projection. The hard time is when we become attached to someone or invested in someone. Oftentimes we want to like fix the money pit, like that home that's a disaster, and we're just going to keep putting more money and more money into it, figuring we're going to fix it. Whereas my coaching is all about helping women become, and men as well, I can help men and women, but mostly women, is become truly aligned and recognize what works for you, and seek someone who's aligned with your values, who's aligned with your lifestyle, who's aligned with your emotional maturity. And because most people date under the premise of chemistry. If we have great chemistry, it's all going to work out.
Right.
That's not how a successful relationship works. Yeah. You have to share the same values. You have to have a lifestyle that's blendable. And ultimately, and this is the biggest challenge, is emotional maturity. And men get thrown under the bus as being emotionally unavailable. Well, I concede that both women and men are both struggling to be emotionally mature because they haven't done this work for themselves to truly, really build themselves from the inside out. And so I wrote this book also, the premise of it at the end is to begin a daily personal development, self-help, and spiritual practice. Daily. Because like peeling an onion, it takes time to remove those layers, those blocks to true love and intimacy.
Yeah, so let's pretend, so most of the audience, I'd probably say 70% men on the show.
Good, we'll talk to them.
Yeah, I'm sure some women listen, but usually it's mostly guys. But so if you're, and I have a lot of guys who are kind of in that age range that you mentioned, midlife dating. So if you're like a single guy, and most of them are single for the most part, single guy, you've been kind of struggling, or actually I want to kind of hear what happened after your story when you kind of went through that after those 100 dates as well. What does the process start to look like where you haven't focused on self-love? Let's say you're way too focused on different techniques you might have learned online, or more like strategies to try to find the right person to kind of fill your void. How can you kind of do that work to transform so you're now offering something else so you can find a woman who's essentially a better fit for you, and kind of get away from the gamey or the inauthentic kind of approach to dating that I think a lot of people fall into?
I love this question. So thank you so much for bringing this up. So much of the advice for men, it's interesting. Well, let me tell a quick story. So I remember once going to a bookstore with my son. I wanted to buy Steve Harvey's book, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man.
I read that one. Great book.
Yeah. And I was at the bookstore and I'm looking at books. These were predominantly relationship books that were all written for, they were books about men, but they were written for women. It's like book after book after book after book after book was written mostly for women to read about understanding relationships and understanding men. I mean, it was all about, is he a commitment phobe? Is he a liar? Is he a narcissist? All these books, right? And my son is like, where are the books for men? Like, I don't see any books for men. And we're looking and we're looking and we're looking. And we found 2 books. And the first book was How to Pick Up Chicks.
Right.
And the second book is How to Pick Up Hot Chicks.
Yep.
Now, I'm saying this tongue in cheek for your audience, so that wasn't exactly it. But the point is, women spend more time trying to understand men, and men spend more time as how can I meet women?
Right.
You know, we want to meet women, you know, we just don't know how to meet them. So a lot of the coaching, especially the pickup artist industry, is centered around techniques. And that's all great. You know, you need, and most of the techniques is really designed to build inner confidence. It's, you know, doing approaches and doing lines and things like that, because there is an element of that initial, many guys struggle with confidence because, you know, walking up to a complete stranger is terrifying. Yeah. And even if they give you a green light, it's still terrifying because just because men are more used to rejection doesn't mean rejection feels good. Right? Yeah. But here's the challenge with a lot of the coaching for men is it's not designed to help to teach you how to be in a healthy relationship, how to be in a real partnership with someone else, how to learn, you know, to navigate that. And most of us, especially the millennial generation, has been raised with parents who are byproducts of divorce. Yeah. So there's not really any good role models. So my invitation for the guys watching this is invest in the books that women are reading. Invest in the books about relationships. There's a great book by Dr. John Gottman called 8 Dates. And it talks about the 8 fundamental areas of importance in a relationship that most people break up over. And so the dates are actually structuring dates with your partner to talk about the stuff that usually gets shoved under the rug that causes breakups later on down the road. So I'm a huge proponent of guys begin to learn about relationships. Read the books like, the books I recommend are Untethered Soul, Return to Love, 8 Dates, to just give you a few examples. Because when you can become a good partner, actually, you'll gain more confidence in the dating process, but then you'll get to keep what you caught. Right. Because you went all this effort catching it, now you want to keep it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that happen a lot. I mean, even for myself, you know, I'm 37. I've been with a gazillion women, but I've struggled a lot in relationships. And almost to the point where it becomes if you get to the point where meeting a lot of women is easy, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot a lot of the time, because then you start looking for the perfect person, who obviously doesn't exist. No one's perfect. Yeah. But when it's kind of like the paradox of choice, when you have so many options, right? Either you believe that you can find this ultimate pinnacle option, but you realize that person, you know, you have to go through so many to find them, and you're probably throwing the baby out with the bathwater a lot of the times too.
Well, I was just about to mention the paradox of choice, and certainly when we're in this swipe mentality, you know, we can swipe, and we're not really connecting. I do believe, though, that when a person truly becomes centered in their sovereignty and their self-love, that even though there's this paradox of choice that does exist, and certainly if you've got options, it's great. When a person truly begins to work on themselves on the inside, they're more compassionate towards others as well. One of the byproducts of self-love is actually being more compassionate and empathetic for others. So what you're looking for, instead of perfect, which oftentimes, but see, that's what ego wants. Ego wants perfect because ego doesn't want to have it fall apart. That's the fear piece. So ego and fear are battling each other. When you're stepping into a more compassionate place, look at, we men, we want someone we're attracted to. Okay. Do we want a 10? Absolutely. Is that okay that I curse?
Sure, no problem.
Absolutely, we want a 10. Okay, but we also, but ultimately, we want someone that we're just attracted to, and they're attracted to us. So that's the most important piece. Second, we kind of have the same values. In other words, I hope this doesn't get misquoted what I'm about to say, but I truly believe if someone loves Donald Trump and someone loves Bernie Sanders, the chances are they have different values. Okay, I'm not saying that's an absolute, but I'm saying
Sure.
there's a good chance of that. Now, these are extremes, okay? But values, everybody has their own different set of values. So it's important to kind of connect. Do we have the same values? Blendable lifestyles. You know, a lot of people these days, because of the internet, spend time dating people that your lifestyles aren't compatible, you know, for one another, especially in the midlife where you've got divorce and children and, you know, alimony and child support and all these different things. And that's just the money piece I'm talking about, but it could be two different separate lifestyles that aren't meshable, that aren't mendable, right, blendable or meldable. And then
yeah,
the
that's
emotional,
a really important piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a
I
lot
think
of
people just totally overlook that, especially, you know, and guys will make the mistake of, you know, placing too much importance on attraction. Yeah, obviously it's got to be there, but yeah, they'll forego a lot of the other values just because the attraction is so strong. And then over time, you know, that passion always fades a bit. And then you're left with someone with a lifestyle that just doesn't blend. And it could be you know, you could go, I know a lot of guys who have gone through, you know, just kind of making them the same mistake over and over, going through that same process. Oh, she's really hot. She's amazing. And then she turned out to not be good for this. And it's usually the lifestyle.
Because they were following the crazy hot matrix.
Right. Exactly.
And if anyone doesn't know this, Google the video on YouTube, Crazy Hot Matrix. So that makes, you know, so if you're chasing attraction and not building the other four foundations. So the foundations that I talk about, obviously chemistry is important, shared values, blendable lifestyles, and then emotional maturity. So we are riddled here, particularly in the United States, and I'd say it's not as strong as the other parts of the world, but a true fundamental lack of loving oneself and being responsible within oneself, because we've perpetuated a victim consciousness here in the United States. I mean, it is a strong victim consciousness. Blame everyone else for your problems.
Yeah.
And so emotional maturity is about the following for you guys in particular. Your actions matching your words. I mean, this is critical. If you're going to say something, then do it. You know, ghosting, yes, ghosting is an option, but that's a bullshit chicken shit option. Okay. Just say, hey, I don't feel we're a fit, and end the text. Okay. It can be as simple as that, but at least do something. But if you say you're going to have a date at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, then be there at 10 minutes earlier. Okay. Be impeccable with your word. And if you're not familiar with the book, the Four Agreements, please Google this right now, the Four Agreements.
Great book.
And start being impeccable with your word, because you know your actions match your words. Next is take personal responsibility for your choices. Again, victim consciousness. You know, it's easy to spot people who are immature. They talk negatively about their past relationships and take no ownership on their part to the ending. And so, you know, these are just a couple examples, and many of your readers might be familiar with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
If you're, you know, he wrote a great book, The 12 Rules for Life, and it's all about how to really become a fucking grown-up.
It's great. I actually just finished it, maybe like 2 or 3 days ago. So
perfect timing.
Yeah.
But for the guys watching, that's a book, and read books. That's the other thing. I mean, and by the way, you can get a lot of great content from YouTube videos. So let me not say you have to read books per se, but find books that are great, and you can even do YouTube videos on the books as well. And I'm just giving you an example because reading isn't for everyone. That can be a challenge. But there's audiobooks, certainly, as well as, you know, visual books like mine, and certainly YouTube videos to get some really great content inside of you. And that book, Jordan Peterson's work, definitely is all about how to be a grown-up.
Yeah, he does a really good job of, you know, there was a draw of a few of my clients when, you know, they first started, well, can I just read the titles of the 12 rules and I'll be good to go? I don't need to read the rest, right? I'm like, no, you really have to read the rest because it's in the explanations and the stories. And, you know, he goes into the Bible a lot and the Torah, and it's really an amazing book. So there's a ton of depth in there.
It's intense. I mean, that's an intense book. There's no doubt
Right.
about it. But guys, here's the reason why you want to begin a personal development, self-help, and spiritual practice. Because, I'm in my mid 50s, okay? And I take someone like my son who's 23. Now, he's feeling a lot of anxiety over life and can feel a lot of fear and whatnot, but he's developing his life right now, his inner life, his inner strength. So he doesn't have to wait till he's 50 years old when you literally, and for guys, I lost all my money in the market crash of 2008. I lost my $250,000 job in 2007, and I went through a divorce the year before that. I had the worst kind of shit happen to me in my life. And I was so depressed that, and this is, I'm in my early 40s. I was so depressed, I went to bed wishing I didn't want to wake up for a long time. And so the sooner you begin a practice of healing on the inside or loving yourself on the inside, it's going to pay dividends by the time you get to my age. And you don't want to be my age having to start this shit. So this is a big encouragement.
Well, it's never too
guys.
late, but
no, it's never too late. Thank you. But start now as you're watching.
Might as well start. Yeah, for sure. How were you able to kind of dig yourself out? What were the daily kind of habits you developed, or some of the rituals to get from that place to obviously doing much better?
Yeah. So I went at one point I lived in a multi-million-dollar home after my divorce, and I had a net worth of over 7 figures. And when I got wiped out, I mean, it was like I was living on the beach, ocean view, and I closed the curtains and curled up in a ball and was taking Vicodin every day.
Shit.
And I actually reached out to my mom and dad, who were in their late 70s, early 80s, and said, I'm like ready to crash, and they're like, come home. And now I'm going to tell you something. To be in mid 40s and have to move in with your mom and dad is the most shameful thing in my life. But it allowed me to rebuild from the inside. I could start over. I went to the nest, and I'm grateful beyond words that I had family and so many people love and support me. So first off, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, that can be really hard for guys. Really.
Yeah.
Hard. Yeah.
And by the way, I have a different opinion just on a separate note. I think for younger guys today, living with your family, have no shame over that whatsoever, because for thousands of years, families used to stick together. And I mean, you would have children, parents, grandparents, and great parents all living together, because that's where, that rootedness that came from family was hugely beneficial. And we here in the United States, we're conditioned to get out of the house when we're 18. But that's shifting now a lot, because that's the generation I grew up in. But family is so important. And that's what helped me begin my life over again, if you will. And then I did a deep dive. I did watch Tony Robbins videos. I watched Wayne Dyer videos. I started to watch Abraham Hicks videos. I started to do workshops. I did the Mankind Project. Are you familiar with the Mankind Project?
I've heard rumors of it, but no.
Okay, guys, do yourself a favor, Google the Mankind Project and check out something called Warrior Weekend. And they're all over the country.
I have heard of Warrior Weekend, yeah.
And I did Warrior Weekend, and so I did it with a bunch of guys. And all of these little things that I did was building upon each other, because they were peeling the layers of crap that had been, been the armor in my life.
Yeah.
And so I slowly began digging myself out of the hole. Finally, by the way, and for the record, I was in here's the thing. I'm 47 years old. I'm living with my mom and dad, and I've got a date with a woman who I met through Facebook and online dating site, who's a doctor. She had her own TV show. She's kind of a little bit famous, because she was on the news she was on the news once a week, because there was always something happening and they'd bring in a guest expert. And we met, our first date was a friendship date. I just said, let's just meet as friends. We had like I said, a Facebook association. Mm-hmm. And she had no interest in dating me. And on our second date, I'm at her house and we're having a cocktail and some appetizers. And for whatever reason, I guess I was talking a lot about my mom and dad. And by the way, she's a therapist, so she's picking up on some clues, right? And she said, "Do you live with your parents?" And like everything inside of me dropped.
Right?
Oh my God, I'm gonna get rejected.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then I shared my story in a little more detail, kind of what I just shared with you guys. And and she actually, in all fairness, she wasn't planning on dating me, but I kept asking her out or saying, "Let's hang out, let's hang out." I basically did the hangout kind of thing, even though, not just, in other words, let's spend time together. It wasn't, let's just do stuff together. It wasn't as romantic, but then within 10 dates, I mean, we had slept together and we were in a relationship. Now, I want to be candid. Oh, and then I moved out of I moved out of my parents' house a couple of years. I was in this relationship for 3 years before I moved out of my parents' house. The relationship didn't work out. We were together 6 years. It was on and off because we had our differences too. We had our differences. But
I love this story. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to, that just goes to show that, like, guys think like, oh, you can't have success if you live with your parents. You can't have success if you're broke. You certainly can't have success with a high empowered woman celebrity doctor. But it's all, at the end of the day, right? It's all about personality, and it's all about confidence.
And I was sincere. And here's the thing, when I met her, my business was just getting started. I wasn't even making $20,000 a year when I started my dating coaching practice. But I was working every day. I was doing like the 12 rules of life kind of stuff. I was putting in effort. I was building she could see me building upon each other instead of just a lot of talk. And actually, the irony was I started to get more TV gigs than she did after a while.
Nice.
Because I was getting a lot of television at that time, because there was kind of a novelty to a guy dating coach for women.
Sure.
But she also saw my sincerity. I always spoke from the heart with her. And so that's what she really connected with. I wasn't a lot of talk. I was also, my actions matched my words every single time. I was impeccable with my word. I always did my best. I tried to not let other people affect my chi, if you will, and not to take things personally. That's, by the way, the 4 agreements that I just shared.
Yeah, especially in our culture with just people are just out of integrity all the time, right? They break agreements. They don't really clean it up. It's just like, yeah, whatever. And then you end up knowing yourself as someone who doesn't keep their word, and you lose all your power that way. And, my brother is 23, and I see it so often in that, in his buddies. And it's just such a simple thing in practice, but it takes a lot, because you have to be really careful. If you're going to say yes to something, then you actually have to do it. So it takes, you have to be really careful what you promise. We've also been
so conditioned to give little white lies for things. Like, and I once actually tried to be in 100% integrity for a week, and I didn't last 2 days, because I remember, like, I used to tell my son, I'll be there in 10 minutes, or I'll be there in 5 minutes, when I was 15 minutes away. So I knew he'd get ready, kind of when I pick him up, kind of thing. But I was out of integrity because I was really 15 minutes away, not 5 minutes away. It's a tiny white lie, but truly being in integrity is saying the truth and not fudging to get an outcome. So it's hard to be in absolute integrity, but the invitation for everyone is begin to practice it. That's what a grown-up does. A grown-up does their best to be impeccable with their word. And when you show up as a grown-up, you're going to attract more grown-up relationships. And believe me, for the guys watching, we're dealing with a population of immature women. I get it. Women think they're so fucking emotionally mature. They're not. They just think they are. And they like to blame men for part of the problem. This is a problem for both sexes. Men and women are equally emotionally immature. Start with yourself and lead by example.
Can you tell us more about just the experience you had with obviously losing your son and overcoming that grief? Um, were you in the dating process at that time? Like when you go through something like that, it can obviously really kind of take you out. Is there anything you can share around how you dealt with that and how you can kind of pull yourself out of that situation?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So, at the time my significant relationship ended, my mother passed away a few months after that breakup, and then my son passed away. And I just wasn't actively dating. I mean, my profiles were out there and I was swiping on occasion, but I wasn't really, you know, my heart wasn't in it. Now,
You're already divorced
yeah, I was
at this
already
time.
divorced. I mean, I'd been divorced for a
Gotcha.
decade. So,
Okay.
so when Connor passed away, I thought my world was going to collapse. I mean, every fear I ever had thought of becoming a parent was realized in that moment. And I remember giving his eulogy. And I said to the audience, I said, I'm making a choice right now. I can grieve through suffering, or I'm going to grieve with love. And I leaned into what does that mean to grieve with love? And I knew that he would never want me to suffer one day of my life. He wouldn't want me to go down that rabbit hole of despair and depression. Now, that's not to say that I didn't experience, anger, denial, depression, all those things. I felt those things. But what happened was I'd actually, all that personal development work I did prior, because when I really had my crash in 2008 with the market and my job and my marriage and stuff, that was devastating. I wanted to end my life, or I didn't want to live. I just didn't want to live. There's a big difference between
For sure.
not waking up versus, killing yourself kind of thing. And I didn't go that far. But all that work I did was like a vaccination to emotional chaos, because I was prepared for this loss because of the work I did. Now, when I say prepared, I was better prepared. I mean, there's no way to prepare for this. I was just a little bit emotionally better prepared because of the work I did ahead of time. And then it broke me open to really leaning into a more compassionate, empathetic way to approach life. So from a dating perspective, I'll be candid with you. It's not easy for a lot of women to hear, especially I'm dating in a pool of women that are mostly, divorced with children. So just hearing about that is a challenge for any woman to hear. Some women, it causes them to be guarded because there's a fear of their own children. But I just lean into it. Like I am making the conscious choice to grieve with love and approach everything from a place of what would love do? How would love respond? And while it's not an absolute, and this is not a guarantee that, you couldn't experience a more horrific thing that happened in your life, and I'm prepared for it, but I certainly feel like I'm in a lot better place than when I was living a life more of ego and fear. And now that I live more of a life of, I'll say, I do my best to live in inner peace.
Right.
And I want to specify this word to all you guys. Inner peace is that place where you feel calm, because when you're feeling inner peace, you feel inner confidence. And so it starts with inner peace, and that's where confidence begins to shine.
Yeah, I like how you said that, because it's tough to have confidence without anything substantiating it, of course.
Yeah.
And another thing that you touched on, I recently read in a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. Okay. It was an interesting study. He was talking about people who went through a traumatic experience.
Yes.
And how, everyone ends up coming out, not everyone, but usually you end up coming out stronger.
Yes.
And that is due to the ability, like the humans, like, we're very resilient. And we think like, oh my God, if something like that happened, my life would be over. I don't know what I could do, but you heal from it. And a lot of the time you do get stronger. Obviously, when you go through more traumatic things in different stages of life, it can hit you harder. Like if it's way later in life, it can be a lot more difficult. But yeah, you just see that, similar to your story, it sounds like you see that time and time again, where if you can get out of the victim mentality and you can, be resilient and learn from the experience, like you can come out so much stronger. So
yeah. I'm going to butcher the guy's name, but there's the Nick Volusius. I never say his last name right. He's the guy with no arms and no legs. He's got a flipper for a, yeah.
Exactly.
I can't say his last name properly. Yeah, this is a guy who's accepted where he's at and he doesn't play victim. He accepts it. And he seems to have a happy life. He's married, he's got children, so he took his adversity and leaned into it. He leaned into it with love. Look at Steve Jobs. He got fired from the company he started. He was emotionally devastated, but he didn't give up on himself. He didn't play victim, and he turned it, he got rehired and turned it around, So I do believe that when we have humbling moments, a truly humbling moment, it's an opportunity to break us open. And what that's breaking us open is to loving ourselves.
Yeah. Really, yeah.
It's really the opportunity to break us open into loving ourselves. And so it's interesting. Have you ever been to a funeral?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure, like a lot of people, this is just something I observed, that you go to a funeral and for 3 days you go, I'm not going to waste one moment of my life. I'm going to be in gratitude. I'm going to take advantage of life to the fullest. And then 3 days later, you're back to your old patterns. Okay?
It's like New Year's resolutions almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A daily personal development, self-help, and spiritual practice is how to maintain that desire that you had when in other words, that moment where you go, I'm not going to waste another day of my life, and to carry it forward. It begins with practice. And we are lazy here in the United States. Not everybody. A lot of people practice hard for the Olympics. They practice hard at being a musician. They practice hard at their work or whatever they do. My invitation is practice, practice, practice on your own self. In other words, the practice is to continually evolve, to try to become, I don't want to use the word better person, but a person that feels happier on the inside. And it takes practice.
Yeah, I think our culture doesn't really put much of a importance or emphasis on emotional growth, or on what's the word I'm looking for? No, there's a lot on make money, get in better physical shape, but they don't focus on mental health enough. I'm seeing a pretty big shift lately, which is great. And I remember about 2 years ago, I adopted a meditation daily ritual and a journaling ritual. And it's been just a huge change in my psyche and my kind of day-to-day experience of life, just doing those couple things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Meditation is a great thing. So can I give your audience 4 things to think about here?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I want you to think of the mind, the body, the spirit, and the emotions. Okay. This is the quadrinity: the mind, the body, the spirit, the emotions. And so it's important to invest in all 4 areas of your life. So, the mind is nurturing it with a lot of great information that can improve on yourself, as opposed to, watching the next Netflix and binging on that. You can watch a documentary too. The body is doing your best. One of the chapters in my book is your body is a machine, not a temple. In other words, your body is really a machine, and if you put good fuel in your machine, it's going to last longer. And if you put crap into it, it's going to break apart just the way a car would. So treat your body like a machine that's there to help you move around. Your spirit is your soul, nurturing your soul, and then the emotional piece. And so all the things that you're doing is hitting all of those areas: your mind, your body, your spirit, your emotions. And that's my invitation for you guys and gals watching, is make that investment into those 4 areas of your life. And a year from now, you'll be going, God, I just feel a little bit better. I feel better.
Yeah. And that's an accumulation of habits, really, because everyone wants to feel good now, but you feel good now by the work you've done, the prior months. And I
And
wanted
a
to ask
lot
you
of
too.
personal development is geared to making money. You know, a lot of it, we men are so conditioned that money is going to solve those other three areas of our lives, you know, but that's not the case. It
Yeah.
takes that work, and you'll make money in the process. But go ahead, you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, they say mo money, mo problems, and that's true. If you have those other things out of whack, the more money is not going to make you any happier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that happen time and time
Just
again.
like great chemistry doesn't equal a great relationship.
Exactly. Well, when we jumped on earlier, you said you'd been up since 5 a.m. And I was just going to guess, usually people who wake up at 5 a.m., they're the very strong like morning routine, or they put a lot of emphasis on, that whole process. Is that something that you typically do, or can you tell us more about your
So first thing I do after I take a leak is my coffee's already ready, set to go, and I turn on my coffee. I grab my smartphone and I go to Match.com, Bumble, and Tinder and start doing some swiping for about 10 minutes. And that's not a joke. I do that for about 10, 15 minutes just because it's like a stupid
ritual. It's a fun thing to do.
Yeah. And then I love the silence of the morning, that first hour. It's just kind of, for me, it's a little bit of Zen time. It's not absolute meditation per se. And by the way, I'm a huge proponent of meditation. I kind of go into what I call my Zen. Like I go inward without just closing my eyes and doing the Om. I spend about a half hour just leaning in, just being quiet, just sipping my coffee, being quiet, take away all electronics. And then usually 6 a.m. I'm on the phone with my best friend, and it's a half hour drive for his work. So I'm coaching him, he's coaching me. Then at 6:45, I have another friend who calls me for an hour, and I get like, why I'm bringing this up is I put a team of people around me to help nurture my soul. And I put, people that actually, like, we call each other out on our shit, but it's designed to really help us really improve. So I've got like a committee around me of people that I talk to on a regular basis.
That's so important. I mean,
that's
huge.
I mean, help, and good people, not people that are going to validate my bad choices. I'm going to repeat that. I don't allow people to validate my bad choices. I want people to call me out on my shit and then help me process stuff in my life. Oh, I've got a great technique for everyone real quick. So is that okay? Do we have enough time?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've recognized that there are times when we need to vent. Like I call my friends and I go, look, I just want to vent. It's just, I got something really shitty I want to get off my chest. I don't want any advice. I just want to say it and be done with it. So that's venting. Then there's processing. Sometimes I'll call a friend and go, look, can I process something with you? I have something going on in my life. It may be dating, it may be business, it may be, with my family, and I want your perspective on it. That's processing something. And then there's times when I want to share something I'm enthusiastic about. So when I'm, I had a text message from a woman that was like really complimentary on a professional level. So I called my friend, I go, will you just be a witness to this? Witness. In other words, I just want you to hear me say this. No response, no validation, but I just want to share it with someone because it felt good. So there's, venting, processing, and witnessing. And that's how I approach my friendships from those areas. Then there's the doing and the being, but,
No, it's great to have those distinctions. And I can imagine, if you were to call me up and say, hey, I just want to, can you do this for me? People love, instruction, and they always want to help. And a lot of the time, like, you share something with someone and then they start giving you advice and you're like, well, I didn't actually want your, right? So setting them up for what you're about to say, I think is really important.
By the way, in relationship, this is hugely beneficial. And for guys, I make this invitation for you and your girlfriends, because a lot of women just want to vent and we men want to fix. Okay.
Right.
So having your girlfriend go, hey, I just need you to hold the basket because I'm going to vomit. Okay. I just want you to hold the basket because I'm going to vomit. It means I don't want you to fix. but then also condition them. If you want me to be involved in helping you, then give me the trigger. Tell me, is this event? Is this a process? Or do you just want me to witness?
Yeah, that's just, I mean, doing that alone will improve your communication.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
And if you guys haven't seen the video about, wait, real quick. If you haven't seen the video, it's all about the nail. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Okay, go to YouTube, type in, it's all about the nail. And this is a great analogy of how women want to vent and men want to fix. And it's 1 minute long, or 2 minutes. So
I'll check it out for sure.
Yeah.
You've shared so many amazing resources with us. I'm going to go back through and write them all down. I'll put links below. Okay. And it's been amazing, just having the time. Where can people find out more about you and get in touch?
Sure. I don't know if you're going to put it on the show notes right here somewhere, but I'm giving away a couple chapters to my book. So you can go to jonathanaslay.com/love. And I'm sure there'll be a link right here in the show notes. And certainly you can Google me, Jonathon Aslay, Aslay. I'm on Facebook. I'm on all the other, things. And by the way, for the guys watching, if you want to send me a personal friend request on Facebook, do so, because I have a lot of women on my page I do a lot of interaction. I have a lot of engagement. It is my blog. So check that out. And then tell your friends.
You can do some matchmaking on there or something, or
I have. There has been matchmaking. I do shoot videos for YouTube every day, with interesting topics. The last one is this is for women, but how to date a man with a special needs child. So I go into a lot more depth than the surface. These are the 5 text messages you send to get laid, kind of shit.
Of course.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
If it only took 5, I mean, everyone would be
yeah, exactly.
Bit of a population problem, I think. But.
Exactly.
Well, Jonathon, thanks so much for coming on. It's been great.
Likewise, Robbie. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. If you want more, go to innerconfidence.com and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for the latest episodes.